such a sudden, huge event for someone so important in your life, it changes your whole world, right? How did you find that?
It definitely changed my life. It was like shock. That was the first time that I had that realization that she wasn't my mum. I don't want to say we're powerless, but there's only so much I could actually do. So why would I get myself so worked up about
And look
it?
at the knock-on effect to that as well. We see it right now more than ever. Obviously, with having so many different prime ministers right now in the UK, it's like focusing on all these things, as you say, you can't control. It's not just like a split second of it affects you. It then starts to work its way into every aspect of your life.
I think you have to disconnect from saying it has to make me money, because that's the first thing, and just say, look, what could I do all day long? What am I obsessed with?
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Success School podcast. It is your host and compere, Mr. Matt Hall here. Thank you as always for joining us. I do really appreciate you giving me your time and your listening ears or your watching eyes if you're watching on YouTube. So today's guest, I am delighted, and I really truly am delighted to be joined by the absolute powerhouse, the absolute joy, bundle of joy, as I always say, that is Ife Thomas. Ife joined us over here on Success School, spoke to our community over on Zoom, and we had an absolutely incredible podcast episode that I'm sharing with you right now. For those who don't already know, Ife is a motivational speaker. She is an author, and she's also a mindset and confidence coach, as well as being a podcaster herself, of course. If you are somebody right now who's going through some challenging times, this is the episode for you. Ife herself has overcome huge adversity in her life, right from childhood up until just the recent years. And she is very, very open, honest, vulnerable, raw, and real in talking about that. And she really does share an awful lot. So I want to say a massive, massive thank you to Ife for that. She's just an absolutely beautiful soul. And I'm sure you are going to get so much out of listening to this podcast episode. This is Ife Thomas. I want to really go into your story because first and foremost, you've got an incredible book called Power Lift Your Career. And as I was reading that, I was kind of a little bit shocked just to hear about your beginnings. And I just wanted to start there really, because I read that, your parents came over from Nigeria in the early 80s. And I believe, was it when you was 1 month old, literally, when their visas expired and they got deported back, and you stayed over here in the UK without your parents effectively as a baby. I want to hear a little bit like that, because that just getting my head around that, both from your parents' standpoint and yours. How did that impact your early years?
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. There's nothing better than being able to speak to like-minded people in this space. So thank you. So when you just said it back to me, I've told this story so many times. It's in my book. It's, part of my brand story. But when you hear someone else say it, it's like I suddenly got a little bit emotional. I think it's because I processed it my own way. So for me, when I was 6 weeks old, and that's when my parents vanished from my life, and I went to a family who were working with Save the Children Foundation. So my mum and dad are white, and I say they're my parents because they raised me, loved me as their own.
Sure.
And
yeah.
I think about how did that impact my life. Well, when I look back, I think, well, before I'd even developed the muscles to smile as a baby, I'd already experienced rejection on a cellular level. But I suppose at the time, I don't know how much it actually did affect me. I was loved, I was hugged, I was looked after. It was as I got older that I started to feel, I think I was 8, because I went to a very white school in a very white neighborhood, and my mum and dad had always been really, supportive and cheerleading. They never sat me down and said, by the way, this is what happened. It was never like a serious conversation like that. It was just the way it was.
Right,
so it wasn't,
okay.
I think I was about 8 when I when I kind of realized I was black, you know, it was like, oh, I'm black, you know, one of those moments at 8.
Mm. And what was that moment like? What, you know, actually realizing sort of your beginnings and realizing, you know, perhaps that they weren't your biological parents, even though, you know, they are your parents. How did you feel?
Well, if I think about it, so just to give a bit of extra information, my mum and dad loved me, cared for me, looked after me, supported me, cheered for me my whole life. And it was never really I always called them mum and dad. And people just accepted us where we went. And it wasn't until 2018 when my mum passed away. In January 2018, she was only 79, and she just found out she had a brain tumor, and she was given 2 months to live. So it was just so, I don't know if a lot of people have lost people. It was just real. And I think
Ife, I didn't realize that, but that is a really similar story to why I started this podcast. I initially started this podcast with my cousin, Dan, and we lost my auntie, which is obviously his mother. So Dan was 20, I think he was 23, and it was exactly the same. It was a brain tumor. We were actually told she might have 6 months to a year, and within 7 days she died. So I didn't realize that was your story, but I obviously have a really close connection with a similar story.
well, you wouldn't know it was my story because it wasn't in my book, because it hadn't happened when I wrote my book. I wrote my book in 2015. So I didn't even know it didn't make it into the book. But I'm really sorry for your loss.
Yeah, likewise. I mean, that's just that such a sudden, huge event for someone so important in your life. It changes your whole world, right? How did you find that?
It definitely changed my life. It you know, it was like shock. But what to go back to the question you asked,
Yeah.
that was the first time that I had that realization that she wasn't my mum. So I was 33, and up until that point I'd never had that moment of, you're not my mum, you're my
Right.
foster mum. It was always, she's my mum.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until when she passed, and if any of you've experienced funerals, everyone gets involved. And my mum's children that she had first, so my mum and dad had 3 children of their own, then they started fostering. So, and they're much older. So like my mum's children are in their 60s. So then she had me years later. So I think that was the moment. And it was like, I've never spoken about this on a podcast, but when we were going to the place where the interment, where you go and see the body, I just remember there being a real divide between the real kids and the foster kids. And that was kind of the moment when I was like, she's not really my mum. That's so weird. Yeah, I was like, it was up until that point, I'd never even thought she's not my mum. It was then. So it was hard.
Wow, and thank you so much, by the way, because we've gone straight into you being extremely vulnerable. No, but I really appreciate you sharing that. And I think what's interesting as well is you inspire so many people and give like so much motivation and joy to people's lives. Just bloody watching your Instagram like makes my day, because you've just got such great energy. And I think hearing that side will actually potentially help people so much more, because it's very easy to look at someone like you, Ife, and just think, oh, maybe she's just got an easy life and she's just naturally super positive. But to hear that you go through the same horrific tragedies, you know, feelings of confusion, challenges, and all that sort of thing, I think that is only going to help so many people that listen to this. And on that, how do you stay positive? Like when you have obviously got challenges like that, and that's a huge emotional thing. And no doubt, you know, grieving is something you go through, you know, when it's somebody like a parent for the rest of your life in some shape. How do you keep getting up and obviously being an amazing mother, an amazing motivator to others? What sort of, have you got any techniques or anything that helps?
Loads.
All right, let's do that.
Loads.
Let's dive into the positive stuff then, if it.
Yeah, I think as well, having the opportunity to experience loss and having the opportunity to experience pain actually helps me to be more positive, because I really think about I don't really moan or complain, because I always just remember the paradox between the moment I found out that she was leaving. I don't think anything can be as painful as that. So everything else is just, it's not actually that bad when you think about it. Losing somebody and knowing they're never coming back, to, I don't know, a client not being happy with you, or you taking your kids to school late, or not having any money, or, any of those things don't really meet up to that level of, because you can control everything in your life apart from life,
Yeah,
living.
right. So it just gives you perspective, right? As tough and as horrific as it is, it gives you perspective over what matters.
Absolutely. And what I do, and I heard Gary Vaynerchuk say it, and I thought that's quite good. He said that whenever he gets like bad news, like something like he's going to lose a big client, or he's had something in the press, or something horrible's happened, he straight away has conditioned his brain to imagine someone calling him and telling him that his daughter's died. And he says, so that helps him to go, okay, it's not that. Yes, the board are trying to, I know, out me from my company, and my share price has just dropped. But actually, this is nothing compared to that. So I think the way that I approach life is I'm always focusing on what I want. I'm always focusing on what I have control over. And it always empowers me. I feel powerful when I'm in control, but things that I'm not in control of, I don't allow myself to even go into that space, because I think a lot of people I meet get so frustrated and angry about things that are happening in politics, in the press, in the government, and I'm like, but we're pretty, I don't want to say we're powerless, but there's only so much I could actually do. Yeah. So why would I get myself so worked up about
and look at the knock-on effect of that as well. We see it right now more than ever. Obviously, with having so many different prime ministers right now in the UK, it's like you just see that then affects every conversation people have throughout the day. It affects their content online, people arguing, and then it's like, oh, and the weather's now bad. It's darker, it's colder, and it just focusing on all these things. As you say, you can't control. It's not just like a split second of it affects you. It then starts to work its way into every aspect of your life.
Ruminates. It does. And it really, you remember when there was no petrol that time?
Yeah.
Well, I remember thinking, well, I've only got like 4 or 5 miles left, and there's no and I thought, well, what can I do? Maybe I'm gonna have to leave the car and then get a taxi and figure it out later. Like that, like where other people were like getting so, and I was like, well, I always say to myself, have I done everything I can do? Is there anything left to do? Okay, no, well, I'll retreat then, get out the car, leave it, and just go home. But some people will start getting so worked. I just don't want to get myself emotionally overwhelmed with something that I can't control. Right. And that's just how I am. So I actually have no idea who the Prime Minister is, or who it was before that. I have no idea. I could be sitting next to someone said to me, my business partner's currently working with some people like Jeff Bezos and all these people. Wow. I said, if he sat next to me on the tube, I wouldn't even know who it was. I really wouldn't know who it was. I wouldn't be like, oh, because I just don't pay attention to anything that is not right in my peripheral vision, because otherwise you can get so bogged down by all the pain that's out there. I'm not naive to think that the world is full of rainbows, but yeah. I think if I can't control something, why would I let that affect my mental health if I can't control it?
Yeah, I totally agree. And the ironic thing is those that are stressing about it and focus on it are actually making themselves weaker to deal with worst case scenarios. If you're focusing on what you can control and your small world, let's say, and being the best you can be within it, then if the stuff outside gets worse, you're more equipped. If you've looked after your health, if you looked after your mental health, if you looked after your finances, you looked after your family, you're going to be stronger to deal with it. So I just think that's a fantastic point. There's something you speak about in your book, which I totally agree with, which is this idea that kind of traditional education really puts on a pedestal the ability to just retain information and pass exams. It's like, as long as I think one of the quotes you said was something along the lines of if you could retain all the lyrics to Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, that doesn't mean you're an awesome rapper. And I just thought that was such a great way of putting it. we get rewarded for things in traditional education that might not be our strengths, but it doesn't mean we haven't got great talents. I'm interested because you spoke about that in your book. What was your experience like with education? And obviously you're quite a performer, you were a dancer, things like that. How did you find that being in a school that doesn't really put things like that on a pedestal?
Great question. Well, if I go back to a moment at school that really impacted me, I was in year 3, and I always my heart used to always race when the teacher asked a question, and I used to just be like, put your hand up. I used to talk to myself then, like, if you just put your hand up, like, and I remember this one time I was like, put your hand up, and I'd go, and then I think, don't ask me, but I wanted my hand up because I wanted everyone to think I was confident, because I didn't want the lack of control as well. I want to be in control of what people think of me. So I was acting more confident than I was. But I remember I've got a sister as well. She's actually my second cousin who was also fostered, and we're 11 months apart. So we end up in the same school year. She's very tall. She looks like Naomi Campbell, and very clever. And I remember, like, when we did our year 3 SATs, now the average is like a 4, you'd get a 4, I remember it. And then the people who got the 5s were like my friend who's a doctor now, and all the smarty pants. It's a little slip back. I had a 3, like not average, like way below average. And I think that was in like maths, English, all the core subjects, like a 3. And I must have been 8 at the time when they do those year 3 like mini SATs. And I remember feeling so embarrassed. And I remember thinking, I'm one of the thickos. I'm actually one of the thickos. And I remember like my stomach churning, and I remember this little white piece of paper that said a 3, but 4 standard, 5's brainy, 3 is you have to go in the like slow class back then. And I was like, this can't be right, because I know I'm smart. Like I knew I was smart. I could have conversations with people. I saw the world. I was a good observer. I was like, why whenever I do any exams, I'm coming up like I'm stupid? And it was really embarrassing. And I remember I didn't even tell my mum. I just folded up the paper into like tiny little squares, put it in my pocket. When people would ask, what did you get? I'd say, oh, I think it was a 4. I'd just lie. I'd say I was a 4. It was a 4. Because I was so embarrassed. And I found school, I used to try my best to memorize like what the teacher had said so I could put it on the test. And I found traditional education really, really difficult. And it wasn't until I went to secondary school when I found RE, because I like religious education, and English. That's when I was like, oh, I like this. And then science, I just started to memorize the textbooks. Do you remember those GCSE textbooks you'd get? I just memorized the answers. I remember the diffusion was one, and I remember just memorizing the paragraph so I could write it word for word, and I got like C's and stuff. I did okay. But yeah, I found that school, I don't think school was a great place for somebody who learns differently. When I was there, I didn't find that I was able to I don't feel like I was supported, really.
The great thing is, though, with the ability of things like, personal development and obviously the creative arts and so on, it's not held you back in any way, shape or form. I think it is such a crime that, and I know it's probably quite a bit better today than it was, but I still think there's such a long way to go with just sort of basic traditional education. And I totally agree. I had a similar experience. There's people like entrepreneurs, people with entrepreneurial talent that might be terrible at science and geography and things like that, but they'll actually feel they're terrible at life just because they're not good at those subjects. And I think it really is something I try and address, through these podcasts, through this community, which is about let's focus on the things that are going to make us successful in life, not just successful passing an exam kind of thing. You spoke about as well, I think it was the Andrew Carnegie Foundation did some research or something, and it was about, what was it about, skill set, and what was the other?
So the Andrew Carnegie Foundation, Andrew Carnegie is a Scottish billionaire, and at the beginning of the 1900s, he was worth more than Bill Gates and Warren Buffett put together. He was very, very wealthy. He actually gave away 90% of his wealth. And he had a guy called Napoleon Hill working for him. And Napoleon Hill wrote the book Think and Grow Rich, which is, I think it was 1934 or something that book came out, but it's a really great business mindset book, Think and Grow Rich. I loved it. And Napoleon Hill, Andrew Carnegie, like you said, Matt, Andrew Carnegie asked Napoleon Hill to go and interview 500 of the most successful business owners of that time to find out what the characteristics were that made them so successful. And Napoleon Hill came back and said to Andrew, oh, I've got 66 traits that make these people successful. And then Andrew Carnegie said to Napoleon Hill, go and find just the top 3. And that's when I talk about the Andrew Carnegie triangle, which is where Napoleon Hill highlights the 3 things that make these business owners all successful. And it was knowledge, skills, which were that knowledge and skill only make up 15%. So, and it's exactly 50% each. So 7.5% is for knowledge, 7.5% is skills, but the other 85%.
And I think, sorry to cut you off, Ife, but I think let's just take a moment to realize that knowledge, so what you know, and skill set, so your ability, only makes 15% of what makes people successful, right? And isn't that the thing everybody puts on a pedestal? I need to know more. I need more information. I need more information. I need to be better. I'm not good enough yet. And that's the thing that I just want to highlight that, because what I've found time and time again is that's the thing that holds so many people back, is feeling the need to be better and they need more skill set. But of course, that's not what they found, right?
Exactly. Thanks for doing that as well. Sorry for just whipping through it.
No.
And you're right, and that's what, when I go and speak to organizations, we need more knowledge training, more skill-based training. I say it's not knowledge, it's not skill that you need. It's more about helping the people to be more productive, because, they're the fixed costs that you can, generate more revenue in your organization if the people are productive. And then the 85%, which is
drum roll, attitude.
Your attitude makes up 85% of the reason why you're successful. It's not skills or knowledge. And we know that because if you had the choice to hire a PA right now, you would like them to be able to maybe take notes and be organized. But really, it doesn't matter if you've got the most skilled person. If their attitude stinks, you do not want to work with them, and you don't want them working for your company, and you don't want to be around them. You'd rather have somebody with no knowledge, no skills, but really a can-do attitude, willing to learn, than somebody who knows everything, who's just, a monster to be around.
So say someone's listening to this now and they think, right, I know naturally I have quite a negative attitude. Naturally, I see the worst in stuff. And I've just heard that and I'm like, oh my God, like that's the main reason I'm not where I want to be. Have you got any sort of steps, any tips on if that's what they feel like is their current default setting and it's just how they've always been? How can they start to work on their attitude and improving that?
Great question. I would say that first of all, full disclaimer is that we get to be whoever we want to be. We literally can wake up tomorrow and choose to have a new personality. For so long I believed that I had to be who I was. I just believed it. Oh, this is just who I am. It's just the way I am. But then when I discovered actually I can be whoever I want to be. I pronounce all my T's now most of the time. That's not how I spoke. I didn't grow up pronouncing my T's. I come from a little town in Milton Keynes, Newport Pagnell. My mum used to talk like a farmer, not like a farmer, but she'd say, "You get me, duck? You okay, duck?" Like she very farmery country voice, and I never used to pronounce my T's. And in 2014, I was working with a mentor, and he was like, "If you want to do more training, you need to pronounce your T's so that you're universal, so nobody knows where you're from, so you can reach more companies." So I actively started to pronounce my T's. So now when you meet me, you might think I sound quite well-spoken, a bit posh then, but that's not how I sounded to begin with. I've developed my speaking voice and my persona and how I hold myself. And I think for anybody who says, "Oh, I'm negative," I think when you say "I am," whatever you say after becomes your reality. So when you say, "Oh, I am just somebody who moans a lot," well, that's who you're going to be. But if you say, "I'm somebody who is able to take criticism really well, I take responsibility for things, I'm very adaptable to change," and when you say all these "I ams," then what you do is you live up to that ideal person that you want to be. And when you have your ideal vision of the kind of human you want to be, and you're working towards it every day, your self-esteem rises, because then you feel confident, because you're like, I'm in control of my life. But when you say, oh, it's just the way I am, I've always been like this, well, then you're not taking responsibility, because you don't have to stay how you've always been.
So it comes back to that saying of like self-development starts with self-awareness. So it's being aware. And then, as you said there perfectly, it's about personal responsibility, making a conscious decision. It's about working on my identity. It doesn't define me just because I've been like this for however long. Even if it's been 40 years, I can decide in this moment that doesn't define who I am today, and I can start to change it. You also said at the beginning of the book that you believe every single person has a gift within us. If somebody is listening to that now and they're like, I'm not gifted, I don't know like what my gift is, have you got anything you would say to them on how do we find what that gift is within us? And importantly, how do we nurture it and excel and, reach our potential with it?
Oh, that's a great question. And I do believe everyone has a gift. Everyone has something, that you're supposed to do. And I think that what happens is we stop looking for it. We stop trying to find it. Now, I know you said you're neurodiverse, and I think especially when you're coming from a place of feeling like you're lack of, you can get lost in all the things that you struggle with. But if you find the superpower, find the thing. So how do you find it? I think you have to disconnect from saying it has to make me money, because that's the first thing. You have to disconnect from all that and just say, look, what could I do all day long? What am I obsessed with? What would I do for free? When I'm doing something, where do I feel that builds more energy? And you can tell by how you feel. So when you're, I don't know, on a forum, writing back about a Netflix program that you've watched and you're loving it and you're buzzing and you're like, oh, I can't wait to write something, then maybe you would be somebody who would be a play review, or a critique, or maybe you would be a blog writer. But it's not about finding the job it's not about, you get your dream and people want to monetize their dream, but first of all, just figure out, what would I do all day long and do it for free, and that gives me more energy. And if you can figure out that, then you can try and say, well, how can I make that my living? And I'll give you a good example. One of the mums, I believe everyone has, one of the mums that I was working with years ago said, my child has got no talent, none. They were autistic, and so they've got none. And I said to them, okay, let's try and figure out what it is, because they were 7 or 8 at the time. I said, well, what does your daughter do? She goes, she just spends all of her time on her iPad. I said, and what's she watching on her iPad? She goes, oh, she really likes Little Mermaid, and she likes Finding Nemo, and she really just watches them on repeat all the time. And I said, oh, okay. I said, has she ever done anything that's kind of shocked you? She goes, well, actually, the other day we arrived at our destination, and she undone her seatbelt for the first time. She didn't know how to undo her seatbelt. She undone it, and then she jumped out the car, and then she ran across the road and nearly got herself run over. She goes, I'm still shaken up about that. I said, so what happened then? Where did she go? She said, well, she ran into the building, and then she goes, and you won't believe what happened next. I said, what? She goes, she jumped into the swimming pool, because I was taking her sister swimming, in her clothes, and then we couldn't get her out of the swimming pool. I was like, so when she jumped in the swimming pool, what did she do? She goes, she just went underwater and wouldn't get out. I said, so she watches Finding Nemo. She loves Little Mermaid. She learned how to get herself out of her seatbelt. She nearly got killed running across the road to go to the swimming pool. She got in the water without any swimming lessons and swam. I said, she's a swimmer. She was like, I never thought of that. I said, who taught her to swim? She goes, nobody. And her daughter's non-verbal, doesn't speak. And I said, get her into swimming. So she started putting her into the swimming that her sister went to, because she wasn't even signed up, because her mum didn't think she'd like it. A couple of months later, they said that she was on the swimming team. And now, years later, this is like 6 years, she's now like a swimmer. She swims for the county, still non-verbal, but she's a swimmer. She was always a swimmer, but her mum couldn't see it. It just looked like she was watching her iPad all day. But it was Little Mermaid, Finding Nemo, jumping in the water with her clothes on, knowing how to swim without being taught. And she's a swimmer. And I was just like, everyone has something. It's just about figuring out how we can process it and recognize it and find a lane for that child. Now she's a swimmer.
I think it's all linked as well. Like if we thought that the concept of money isn't actually a thing, where does that come from? A lot of that comes back from school, and we taught what is a job or what's a good job, and, you know, be a doctor, get good education. If we strip away the concept of money and what we're told is a job, and we go back to basics, what lights us up, what gives us energy, what makes us passionate, and start there, not only are we going to maybe find what is our gift to others, but then we can hone it and we can build on it, and we could maybe make an incredible life for ourselves as well as for others. I want you to talk a little bit about manifestation, because I heard you speaking about how manifestation might have just got you into Big Brother, the reality TV show that you did. Would you just share a little bit of ultimately your experience of getting into Big Brother, but also what your thoughts are today on manifestation and if it works? Because I know some people are like, I don't think it works, it's a load of rubbish. Some people love it. What's your take on it?
Oh wow! Well, I had to learn the most. So when I first got into understanding the law of attraction, it really was for me. I was like, right. I'd read The Alchemist by Paul Coelho about omens and stuff, and I was like, okay. And then someone suggested I read The Secret. My good friend Chrissy, she said, why don't you read The Secret? And then she goes, there's a YouTube video out. This was 2006. So in 2006, I watched The Secret, and I remember thinking, wow, I can bring things into my life, you know. And up until that point, I had, yeah, Mark's a great book. First of all, I felt like, because my foster parents took me in, I felt a big sense of gratitude to them. You know, they picked me, they picked to raise me as their own. So I always felt this need to do well, so that to say, look, you made the right choice picking me, you know, keep wanting to let them know they made the right choice. But then when I trained as a dancer and I started auditioning, I'd always go to auditions. I'd need people to pick me. I'd want the choreographer to pick me. I'd want to be picked. It was constantly trying to be picked. And then when I'd watched The Secret, this thought came in my mind, and I thought, I don't need anyone to pick me. I can just pick myself. I can just decide what I want, pick what I want, and then put it out there and get it. How amazing. I was like, let's throw a party if this stuff works. Now, I get The Secret's very loose in its description, but then I started studying Bob Proctor, who was on The Secret, and he does a lot of stuff. Well, he's now passed away, the late Bob Proctor, but on The Secret, he talked about the paradigm shift, and he started talking about quantum physics theory on a very basic level. So then I thought, you know what, let me learn about quantum physics theory or mindset. Let me really get a grasp of how this actually works, which meant it went from being woo-woo to actually being science. And then now I love quantum mechanics. I love learning all about atoms and how every thought vibrates, and learning about, you know, quantum entanglement. I love learning about how our thoughts can vibrate and attract into our lives the things that we want. So when we talk about manifestation, on the surface level, everyone says, oh, manifestation, just hope and believe. But on an actual quantum level, when you see what it is that you want and you put it out there and you're focused on it and you can see it, and then the emotion drives the magnetic force. So when you see it and you believe it, and then the emotion is so strong, it kind of like attracts more and more of what you want into your vibrational frequency, which is why when I read The Secret, I was still not sure. And I was like, this sounds like, if this is really how the world works, then what have I been doing all this time? So I remember going home, and my mum and dad were watching Nikki Graham, the late Nikki Graham, because she's passed away as well, on Big Brother. And I was trying to tell my mum and dad something, and they were kind of like ignoring me. And they were just fixated on Big Brother. And I said, I'm going to go in that one day. That's what I said. I was like, I'm going to go in that. And they were like, you know, it's really like very competitive to get in. I was like, I'm going to go in. So anyway, the next year, Grace Adam Shaw was on it. And Grace and I went to the same dance school. We both trained at Erdang Academy. And so I know her. And then the year after that, Lydia was on it. She trained at the Erdang Academy. So Grace was in the year below Lydia. Lydia was in the year below me, and there was me. So 3 people, all from the Erdang Academy. 2 people from the Erdang Academy had been on Big Brother each year. I was like, they must like dancers. I said, I'm going to go on it. I'm going to. And then that was it. And then out of the blue, I kept seeing myself with Davina, seeing myself going into the house, seeing myself turning up in a car and getting out. And at the time, I hadn't really watched any of it. And I didn't really think reality TV was, I was a bit like, oh, it's not my kind of thing. I'm a professionally trained dancer. I'm not going to do that. Oh, you know, a bit snobby. And then what happened was, my friend who used to dance with me, who has a dance school in Milton Keynes, sent me an email saying, Big Brother are looking for dancers. I forwarded you the email because they sent it to me, but I don't want to go for it, but you would be great. And I was like, and they said, we need a video, we need this. I was like, I'm going in. And I just started, we borrowed my uncle's video camera, I filmed myself doing loads of like little funny bits and then sent it to them. And then I didn't go and queue up, you know, like you see the crowds of 100,000 people. I didn't queue up. They emailed me with a private time for an audition, and I just turned up and went into a room with the producers. They interviewed me. I think I did like 4 or 5 interviews. And then on the day of the event, this is when I talk about the law of attraction. I get there, and in my mind, I'd visualized, you know, when you watch Big Brother, you used to see them come in a car because they already knew they were going in, and they'd get out, and it'd be like, well, this Big Brother, there was no car. I turned up and there was like 70 other people who all thought they were in, and they were like, oh, you know, plot twist.
No, that's mad. So you actually were all told, all 70 were told, you are a housemate this year. You get there and you go, oh, you might not be.
Yeah, basically we were all under the impression that we'd got through and we were in it. And then they were like, and you see all these other people and you're like, oh my gosh. So they put us all on the stage, and they put cameras on us all, and then they broadcast it out to millions of the British public. And in that moment, most people are thinking, oh my gosh, how embarrassing. If I don't get through, everyone's going to see me lose on national TV. And everyone was like going, oh, and people just started saying, I'm not going to get in. I know I'm not going to get in. I know I'm not. And I remembered, actually, everything I've learned says you have to believe. You have to believe. And if you think you're not going to get in, you won't get in. And I was like, oh, I'm going to try it. I'm going to try and believe. And up until that point in my life, I had always expected the worst and hoped for the best. You know, I'd always protected myself. If I don't get in, it's okay because I've prepared myself for it. But I just thought, with everything I'd read, I thought, no, I'm going to believe it. And they gave us all a train ticket, paid for train ticket to go home. If you don't get in, they're paid for you to go home. So I was like, I ripped up my train ticket. I was like, and I didn't have any money really. Like if I didn't get in, I really would have had to ask my mum to send some money. And, you know, I didn't have any resources. So I was just like, ripped up the ticket, and I was like, I'm going in. And I kept saying, and this is like, I was standing on the stage with the cameras on me, thinking about all my people from my hometown, the world watching me. You know, this could be public humiliation, really. Like, oh, look at Ife trying to get into that house. Haha. You know, like all of that. So I'm standing there and I'm like, I'm in. And I just allowed myself to vibrate the feeling of I'm in, like the feeling of them saying my name. And then they said my name, number 14th, I think, person. And when they said my name, I was like I wasn't any more special than the other people on the stage. Like there was no reason why I would get in over anyone else. Like it really was, everyone was as good as each other. And I when they said my name, I thought, oh, the secret works. It actually works. And then I thought, I don't have to go in this house. I don't have to win the 100 grand. I'm going to create my own life. So, and I said to Davina, the secret, it works. And Davina was like, what secret? I was like, it works. Like I was the first person on national television to talk about the secret, like ever. And Amazing. Then I was like talking about the law of attraction and all of that stuff in the house, but I don't think they showed it much. I think they made me look like I'm a little bit of a whimsical kind of woo-woo person, but I was like, the secret, it works. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. And,
I love how you got in the house and you was kind of like, I don't even want to go in. Like, I can have anything I want. Why would I spend my next few weeks with strangers being judged by the general public? I'm interested, what was the experience like for you for being in Big Brother? Was it an enjoyable one? Was it challenging? What was some of the lessons you got out of it?
It was really hard because at that time I didn't know I was autistic. I just had my own like little quirks, but when I got into the house, it was like my my sensory processing had heightened. Like the lights were so bright. It's like, you know, when you go to Sainsbury's, they've got those and the like studio lights, and no one else seemed that affected. But I remember feeling like I'd get like a really quivery eye that would do this, like, and I'd feel like I was having heart palpitation. I felt so like, you know, when you put on shoes that are two sizes too tight, that I felt like, you know, when you take your foot out and you're like, whew, I felt like the whole time I didn't know, but I was in shoes that were too tight, and I also felt like a little bit, I suppose I was a bit worried that I might find out that I'm actually not a nice person. It's such a weird feeling. I remember thinking, gosh, what if I'm actually a horrible, bitchy person, and now everyone's going to say, what if I think I'm a nice person, but actually I'm not?
Because they are putting you in a heightened reality, aren't they? And they're challenging you, they're testing you. It's not a normal way to live. And you're in front of everybody. And like you say, you got studio lighting. It's a very vulnerable thing to do, really.
Very. And the cameras are everywhere. Like even when you go to the toilet, so they don't broadcast you doing a wee-wee, but there is someone behind that camera that is watching you.
Whoa, that's not cool at all.
It was the experience, though. I tell you all the scary stuff, but it was the best experience of my life, because it reinforced to me that actually I'm quite a good person. I'm a nice person. I get along with people. I'm a team player. And I think it made me like myself more, because I was 100% myself. So I thought, if no one likes me and I'm myself, then it's better than to pretend to be someone else. So,
Amazing. So it's that time of year now. I feel like a lot of people, as we touched upon, like they're at that mindset where the year's done. It's dark, it's cold, it's gloomy. There's a lot of madness out there in the world, and I'm seeing a lot of people's motivation dwindle. How do you approach this time of the year? I'm looking at it like there's still nearly 9 weeks to go. We can still have a super productive 9 weeks if we choose to. When it comes to goal setting and reviewing goals, and again, coming back to the important 85% attitude, what's your approach?
Oh, I love that. Well, my approach is this. If you think you're running a 100-meter race, or let's say a 120-meter race, so you've got the 12 months of the year, most people get to the 10th month, 11th month, which we're in, and slow down. Yeah. And I think if you think of it like a race, if you were running a 120-meter race and you wanted to win, you don't slow down as you get to the finish line. You speed up.
Speed up, go quicker.
You go for it, because everyone else is slowing down, which means you've got more chance of like crushing it. And you know, when they're trying, if you took a picture of a finish, if it's like they can't tell who won, you notice that the runners' heads are down because they're trying to get their head in. So that's how I think about it. I think right now we're in November, if everyone else is slowing down, we need to speed up. We need to quickly say, what was our goals that we wanted to achieve this year? Are we going to achieve them? Should we maybe adapt those goals? Right, what's my goal? What's my vision? Where do I want to be? And then flash forward to the 31st of December and ask yourself, what do I want that to look like? And then come back to where you are today. And it's like a gap analysis. You're like, so this is where I am now. This is where I want to be. What do I need to do between the gap of where I am and where I want to be? How do I make that happen? And then give it everything you've got. And even if you get to the end of the year and you haven't reached the goal, you are much closer than if you slowed down and said, you know what, I'll set some new goals in January. I'm like, no, I'm on it. I'm actually going, but my legs are like, so fast, because I'm like, I'm not getting to the end of the year without like that, that photo finish.
I love it. And I think it's such a great way of looking at it. When you think in business in particular, if you think a lot of the potential competition that's out there, if they're in that mindset of slowing down and you think of it as a race, like if you speed up, look at the widening of the gap you can create and you can finish the year so strong. I absolutely love that. I also know that you are a parent, and out of everyone I follow on social media, you're up there in the 0.0001% of people that are so consistent in showing up. You put out so much content. You know, you seem to be so busy. You've got your radio show, you've got your podcast, you've got your coaching, you've got your speaking. and being a bloody mother and having time for self-care. So let's talk about that word that gets used, balance. Like for you, do you have boundaries? What's your version of balance? How do you make it work as a super successful woman and a parent and a partner and all these other things, all these hats that you wear?
Oh, that's such a good question. And I think work-life balance just doesn't make sense to me. I think if you try to do it, it's just like you're just going to be disappointed with yourself. It's not, when I started my business when I was pregnant with my first son. So I went back to work 2 weeks after he was born. And in my mind, I'm going to build this business so that he can have everything. So I got very quick into the mindset of, I'm going to sacrifice being there so that I can create something for him, which thank God I did, because building my business back then has meant that we've had the financial ability to be able to support my son who's autistic, to go to school in Canada, have specialist treatment and have everything that he needs. So now he goes to a mainstream school, independent school that we pay for with all of his peers.
Wow.
That wouldn't have happened if I wouldn't have done the stuff when he was a baby. And then with his brother, who's 17 months younger, he was born the 29th of December. So on the 3rd of January, after he was born, I went back to work, because that was a really difficult business year where I had 6 members of staff coming after Christmas. And on the 29th, when I popped him out, I looked at the bank account and there wasn't enough money to pay. So I think my staff wage bill was like 7,000 or something. And I only had like 3,600. So I was like, they're all going to come back after Christmas and I can't even pay them. Like my whole thought was, I can't pay my staff. So I was like, on the 3rd of January, he went to my sister, who I convinced to stop working so we could pay her to be a full-time nanny for them. My youngest Cuba went straight to her, and I was in the car on the 2nd, making my way up to Liverpool to go and meet an accountant to see if I could sign them up so that their membership for the year would pay for some more wages.
Wow.
I needed to sign up, and I signed them up, and then I was able to pay the wages. I didn't have any money to pay myself, but I paid the staff, and none of them knew that. Like, up until that point, I was like, after Christmas is when you need to be paid by your employer. You need to be paid after Christmas. You spent all your money. I was like, oh my gosh. So I remember just driving. So yeah. So what I'm saying is from a young age, I missed out on so much of my children. I missed their first step. I didn't potty train. Not that that's something I wanted to do, but I missed out. Potty training? That's not in my expertise. But I didn't do that. I didn't do any of those. Like, I don't know how to potty train a child. I've never had to do it. I don't, the singing the ABCs and all, not part of it. I was building the business, but by the time they were like 6 and 7, which has only been the last 4, I've been able to like take them to school and, do all this stuff. But when I think about work-life balance, I just think it's not something that's even possible, because in my life, I find, and I heard this quote by Shonda Rhimes, who is a television producer and writer. She wrote Grey's Anatomy, Bridgerton. She's like this boss lady writer. She talks in her TED Talk, The Year of Yes. And she says, when I'm succeeding in one area of my life, I'm usually failing in another. Like, it's just like, it isn't all sunshine and rainbows. And I think, to give you a good example, I think I booked this job. I think I got an email from my agent to say I booked eBay to speak for eBay. And I was like, wow, this is like amazing, and I was so excited. And then I got a message saying from my son's school to say that I'd sent him to school without his tennis kit. And it meant that he was the only child in the class who hadn't got the uniform, and that he was going to be. So I went from like that to like, oh, I forgot. Or sometimes I will be supporting my child, watching a rugby match, and forget that I booked a client call. And then my client would be like, oh. So it's like, normally when something amazing's happening on one side, something really sad's happening on the other. And I think that's just the way it is. Yesterday, I was speaking at an event in London, and I had it was brilliant. And then when I got back home, I walked in the door and realized it was like 10 o'clock and I hadn't seen I didn't even say goodnight to them. And I thought,
I think like the phrase that comes to mind is the phrase that Tony Robbins says, and that is that the lowest standard you can aim for is perfection. And I guess what you're saying there is it's not necessarily about having this perfect life with perfect balance and, you know, being the perfect mum, perfect entrepreneur, and so on. What it's about is acceptance of the reality. And it's about knowing you're doing the best you can with what you've got, with the best of intentions, being the best person. But ultimately, you're a human being, and that doesn't ever equate to perfection, right? So I guess if you can accept, embrace, and be at peace with that,
Yeah, and
who needs balance?
also as well, I say it's like a blend. It's a life blend. So it kind of blends in together. But with my children, and what I do is Tim Story, this speaker, I asked him the question, how do I, and he said, the grace is in the gaps. And I love that, because today when I was on a call before this and my son had come in, and before I got on with you guys, I went up to him in the living room and I gave him like a big squeeze and a big hug. I said, I love you. How was your day? Kissed his face. I was probably there for 5 minutes. I looked in his eyes and I was like, oh, I love you so much. And I spent 5 minutes like pouring into him. There's 5 minutes. And I was like, I'm going back out. I'm going into the office now. He's all right, mummy. And I think sometimes if you give intentional, like eye stares, like head and hugs, 5 minutes. I probably spent 5 minutes.
That's powerful. It's not all about the amount of time, it's about the quality, right? It's about the quality of being intentional, being present. And I think that's such a profound, powerful thing to think about. Ife, I want to leave a little bit of time to make sure we can get some members' question and answers in. So I'm just going to finish on the last couple of questions now. But I just want to say thank you so much, Ife. You're an absolute superstar. And, you know, to hear some of your stories being heartbreaking, and I know it was like difficult to listen to. So thank you for being so vulnerable, for sharing that, and for just being so open today. It's been amazing. Just the final couple of questions before we finish. This podcast, this community, Success School, it's about, as we've kind of touched upon tonight, the idea that traditional education doesn't teach us an awful lot of life skills that we need. So I'm interested if you was to share 3 lessons that you've learned from life that you didn't get out of school. And there would be 3 important lessons that you would share to help people not just survive, but thrive in life. What would be those three lessons?
Okay, so the first one would be to set goals, because no one talks about setting goals at school. Only 3% of people set goals. And out of those 3%, only 1% write them down. So write down your goals and own them. That would be the first thing. The second thing I would say is recognize that nobody's coming to save you. There's not gonna, don't hold all your luck on winning the lottery. Don't wait for someone to pick you or choose you. Pick and choose yourself. Make it happen for you. And then the last thing I would say is that you have to understand that anyone who is where you want to be is not better than you. They're not better than you in any way. They've just figured out how to make it happen. That's it.
Beautiful. If people want to follow you, listen to your podcast, listen to your radio show, all the amazing things you do, what are the best places they need to go to find more Ife?
Oh, thank you. So you can find me, I'm on Instagram at Ife Thomas, or you can find me at mindworkout.co.uk. That's where all my stuff is. And yeah, social media, I'm pretty, like you said, I'm on stories. If you want to like get to see behind the glossiness of Ife Thomas, then just click on my stories and just watch my stories, and you'll get to see, like I show pretty a lot. Yeah, and just, I suppose more than anything, you can hear me. I've got a podcast now called Everything You Need to Succeed, the podcast, and you can get that on Apple or Spotify. But yeah, I say pretty much the same thing. I think that's the key to it. It's you can listen to so many people and they're all saying great stuff. You just have to pick one person to listen to and follow, rather than jumping across to everyone at once. And then just go for it.
Ife, thank you so much. Final question to finish the podcast. What is your personal definition of success?
Oh, okay. So in my book, I say success is different for everyone. And Devon Franklin says success is when you become the director of your life, when you become the boss of your life. And I think for me, success is being the boss of my mind. You know, I really, it's been over a decade now that I have had full control of my mind. You know, I think success is knowing that I'm never going to let myself slip into a black hole of depression. I'm never going to allow that to happen ever again. And I am in control of my thoughts. As long as I'm in control of my thoughts, I'm successful. That's how I look at it. If ever I'm not, then I'm losing.
Ife, thank you so much. And that is not the end of this episode, because indeed, Ife stuck with us for around about another 30 minutes, answering all questions from everybody in our Success School membership. Here's a little preview of that conversation.
How much would you say, with your attitude is quite natural to you, and how much of it is something that you've had to learn and cultivate?
I don't find anything natural.
And how long did it take you to get used to being all over social media? Because it's something that I struggle with on and off, of like being that visible.
It's very clear you've turned your pain into power, helping other people understand how their brain works.
Wondering, like you said about losing your mum. I lost my dad a year ago. How did you get through that first year, and what kept you going? And, just a bit of advice, really.
Now, if you want access to listen to all of that full interview, including those membership questions, all you got to do is sign up to the Success School community. And if you haven't already done that yet, why not? Honestly, I am genuinely making it my passion, and I'm getting a lot of joy out of this as well, to make this the most accessible and indeed affordable community on the planet. I just know that my promise is I'm going to over deliver. You are going to get the value that you do not even get sometimes when you pay thousands and thousands of pounds for some of these courses that are out there, all these coaching packages and so on. When you sign up to Success School, you get access to over 50 training videos, all around high performance mindset, psychology, as well as business, branding, sales, marketing, and so much more. You also get to listen to the over nearly 2 years worth of live coaching sessions that we've done in the replay section. You will be invited to join us on all upcoming live podcast episodes with all future guest speakers, where you don't only just get to listen to this episode, you also get to be there live for the Q&A and ask your questions directly on camera if you want to our podcast guests. And that is not all. You also get to join us in our private community on our WhatsApp group. And you also get one coaching session every single month with me, where we do some live coaching with the rest of the community. And right now, at the time of recording, it is still completely free. That's right, free to bloody come and join us for a try before you buy trial. So you get 2 weeks free of charge, which means you'll be invited to the live calls we're doing in this period and everything else that I've just discussed there. After the 2-week trial, when you feel like, do you know what? This is actually unbelievable value and so useful in my life. If you want to stay, it's just £19 per month. That is it. 19 quid. Less than a £5 a week to invest in you, your personal growth, and your success. Less than £5 a week to be surrounded by an incredible community, and also to be learning, to be, inspired, motivated, and given that push ultimately that is very hard to get when you're doing this on your own. Famous thought leader Jim Rohn said, "You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." That is what Success School is all about. It is making sure that the people you're hearing from on a daily, weekly basis are the people that motivate and inspire you to be better, so that you can adopt those habits, those traits that are going to help you move forward in your life. If you want to join Success School and start your free trial today, click that link in the show notes right now, and it will literally take you like 30 to 60 seconds to sign up. We just need a few details. You will be asked for payment details. That is just to make sure you're setting up your account correctly on the system. But if you cancel before the free trial ends, it won't cost you a penny. And if you decide to stay, it's only £19 per month, which basically means if the free trial is still available right now, at the time of listening to this, you're going to get 6 weeks access into the Success School membership for less than 20 quid. It's an unbelievable bargain. If you don't believe me, click that link, sign up for free, find out for yourself. And another quote that I like to end this podcast on from famous thought leader Jim Rohn is that traditional education will make you a living, but self-education will make you a fortune. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast, and I will see you next time.